Most leaders think their job is to push people harder. But what if great leadership is actually about removing the obstacles that are in the way? In today's episode of The Self-Led Leader, I am joined by Ben Carroll, a healthcare executive with over 20 years of leadership experience in and out of the military. And in this episode, we talk about what leaders often get wrong about performance, why adaptability is more than just a survival skill, especially in high-stakes environments, and why leadership is less about controlling the outcomes and more about creating the right conditions for your people to thrive. If you've ever wondered how to lead in this modern age of leadership in a way that is still aligned with your personal philosophy and your values, this conversation will give you a lot to think about. Let's get right into it. Welcome to The Self-Led Leader, a podcast for high performers who want to lead from alignment, not expectation. I'm Dr. Christina Ady, a social psychologist, and I'm here to help you lead with clarity, not chaos. This show is about what happens before the strategy, your mindset, your nervous system, the inner leadership that shapes everything you say and do. Because presence isn't about being loud, it's about being aligned. Let's get right into it. Thank you so much for joining me on The Self-Led Leader. Can you start today by just introducing yourself to the listeners and telling us a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, sure. My name's Ben Carroll. I am a active duty military healthcare executive administrator. Got my starts 20 years ago in the Army, where I was a Cav Scout, which basically means I got to walk around in the woods. And I did that for about 10 years and said, you know what, got a family now, being out in the woods all week is not the best way to manage that. So I ended up going back and finishing school and getting my commission as an officer. And then that's when I pivoted over to healthcare. So I've been doing that for the past about 13 years. And yeah, so that is me. And I'm getting ready to retire from the military this summer. And I'm transitioning over to private sector healthcare and just getting hot and heavy in the job search.
Very nice. What is that like? It feels like it's such a significant chapter coming to a close. And now you're transitioning, but you're transitioning into an entirely new, I don't want to say new, it's similar but different. And so that comes with its own challenges. And so how are you just feeling on a personal level about that coming to a close?
Yeah, it's been something I've been reflecting on for a while now. I was just talking about this earlier today. I think I'm closing a chapter and starting a new one. And I've been so focused on prepping for the new chapter that I had to pause. I need to make sure I pay enough attention and give enough emotional attention to closing the old one. I've had experience in the past where I haven't done that, and it sneaks up on you if you don't. It's a thing where the head doesn't always lead the heart the way you expect it to, so you can logic your way around a decision or a certain scenario. But if you don't give it the emotional attention that it deserves, then the heart's going to sneak up on you, and it'll be painful later. Where did this come from? And so I'm trying to give that some attention as needed. I think for me, because I look at my military service, it kind of, the way I feel like it ended 13 years ago when I commissioned, because I spent so much time in a fixed facility running healthcare delivery. I do it in a uniform, but it's not the same environment by any stretch of the imagination. So when I write about the things or talk about my military time, I'm really already thinking about it in the past tense. So I think that's helpful as I transition, because the brotherhood piece, those types of things, those relationships are still there. They're already kind of distant because we're all scattered. So it's exciting. I won't go into it here, but over the course of my career, I've gone through several different transitions. I was talking to a buddy of mine earlier. I went from a deployment in Iraq. I was in Iraq, the air base, when I got picked up for school, to my first day in class back at university within 30 days.
Wow.
Like, very quickly. And that was jarring.
Yeah.
To go from one environment to the next. But then I finished and I made the transition from enlisted to officer. That's been a transition. So I've been through these transitions throughout my career, but it is easy to look, because I'm military, we move so often, to think of it in terms of a move, but it's not like the other moves, and you need to make sure that you're treating it as such.
Mm-hmm. It's a big one. Clearly, adaptability is a strength for you. But
Yeah, there's no
Well,
choice.
yeah, well, many strengths I find are the result of not really having a choice but to adapt in life. And so looking back on it, what would you say are some of your biggest or your favorite lessons that you've learned, primarily in leadership?
Well, I think the easiest way is just to give my general leadership philosophy because it's been a
Yeah.
culmination of all those lessons, and you can just pick on the pieces of it that we can pull out. My definition of leadership is simply removing barriers to team success.
Okay.
It's founded on the idea that no one wakes up every day excited to suck at their job. No one wants to get up and not perform. So if you're not getting the performance or we're not moving in the direction we want to be or the organization isn't where we want it, there's probably something environmental or leadership wise that's causing that. It's very seldom the motivation or capability of the employee. Now, they might be in the wrong job, the wrong fit, but I firmly believe if you put people in the right place, the right job that fits their skill set, and give them the right tools to do it, and then lead them through the challenges, they're going to outperform. You get a team that is properly put together like that, they're going to outperform anyone, right? Any group of people. And that's my simple way of looking at it. But it opens the door for a lot more nuance. Sometimes the barrier is the person. It's something going on inside them that you got to lead them through, work them through, talk them through. Like you're getting in your own way or you're getting in our way. You are the barrier to the team and we need to fix that, right? And you got to have those kind of conversations. But mostly it's just about being present and understanding the pebbles in their shoe that are eating on their foot every day and making sure you're removing those and just doing things that really give them the tools or equips them to do what it is they signed up to do. That stems from several lessons I learned in the military. So one of the biggest ones I learned that comes from was as a non-commissioned officer, so a junior leader enlisted. It was our job to train our soldiers and make sure they knew their job. And we always talk about take care of your soldiers and here to take care of your people. And some would put that in the bucket of being coddling them, protect them from extra duties or extra assignments, make sure they get what that they have a just nice comfortable life. And some really good leaders taught me early on that's not what it means. What it means is making sure they have the skill set to go down in a combat environment and survive and protect their brothers and sisters left and right and come home safely. That's taking care of your soldiers, making sure they get back safely. And so that was foundational for me. And you look at that now, you fast forward several years and you look at healthcare delivery, it's the same concept, except it's giving them the tools to make sure they're there to do it. It's someone else's life, not theirs. And so those have been one of the big formative lessons that shaped how I lead today.
Yeah. No, I love that because it's very similar to my own philosophy, but also a question that I've contemplated since childhood really boils down to this idea of like, how much is it mindset versus skills, right? It's like this, the chicken or the egg kind of equivalent debate for me, right? And really unpacking this sort of idea. Skills matter. Skills definitely matter. And maybe we'll come back to the idea of you're preparing them to be able to handle whatever comes while also helping those around them to get home safely. So skills definitely matter, but how much of that is mindset? And so in healthcare, I imagine where the stakes are so high, there's so much pressure. It's literally life or death on a daily basis. How do you see the sort of balance between mindset, skills, and I don't know, which one wins out for you?
I'm a, I am a big mindset person. When I do interviews, I want someone who is eager to learn,
Mm,
that will push through barriers, that will figure it out, or has the ability to figure it out. I
yeah.
give skills to people with that mindset. But I'm coming to learn as you start to understand behavior psychology and you do, I don't know if you've ever done the spectrum analysis and you understand the different colors and the role, like the categories. Some of that's personality, and not everyone's going to be that type. And that would be optimal for me because I can teach you to do what I want you to do. And I want you to think, I think in terms of obstacles are just an item on the checklist to get to the ideal end state. Those are the people I try to align myself with, but not everyone's shaped that way. And there's others that in organizations you don't need everyone to think like that because there are some just routine things that need to happen
Yeah.
and to happen well and quickly and efficiently. And you need people with the skill set to do that. So I think it's always a balance of, it really boils down to understanding what the organization needs, what those roles are, and then knowing your people to put the right people in the right place. I think this caveats right into one of my favorite stories, one of probably the most fulfilling times as a leader. This was that same Iraq deployment that I came home early from. We were getting ready for it. And I was in the 82nd Airborne Division, which is one of the active or regular component armies, top end units jumping out of airplanes. And we were getting ready, doing all of our training for this deployment. And he was a young private, he was new, and he was not keeping up. It was very difficult for him. And he was very clearly holding the platoon back, holding the group back. And I could just see it eating. He was just deteriorating. Like, the look on his face almost daily coming out was like, what have I signed up for? And I was like, I've got to do something about this before we leave. This is going to be a problem. And I don't think I did this because of it. I wanted to do it anyway. But I had just gone through the whole spectrum analysis with my family. We had done this personality assessment. So I went and got it and did it with all my team,
Nice.
my whole section, because I wanted to understand what made the team click.
Nice.
And turns out he is a high blue green, which meant he's very socially tied and analytical. And a lot of what we were doing was gold, like we analyze the best way to fight, and then we distill it down into battle drills where you just execute. Just you have to be fast.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of gold that you use that. And there's quite a bit of orange too, because there's chaos. It's weird, both. There's not a lot of time to stop and think at the level where we were in the training cycle. So he's trying to understand it, and he's much slower processing than everyone else. And he's seeing that it's pulling the team down. So for a blue-green, I am killing, right? The green is slowing him down. Like, I'm killing the team. This is me. Like, I'm not pulling my weight. And that was just depressing him.
Right.
So I was like, okay, he's high green. So what I did is when we went downrange, we happened to fall to be in charge of the range, shooting range. We were going to teach the Iraqi army how to shoot old M16s that we had given them, right? So you can imagine that environment. They were shooting our weapons, and it was our ammunition. That accountability of those rounds was very important. It's always been important. This is a heightened level of importance. And I put him, a private. Normally you have a more senior person in charge of the detail, managing those bullets, basically. I put him in charge of it. And everyone looked at me like I was nuts. And I'm like, no, he's high analytic. He's going to do this. And he crushed it. And his mood changed. And because he was contributing, right? He found something he was good at that contributed to the team. And by extension, he got better at everything else because it gave him confidence. Yeah. And that was just one of the coolest moments for me to see a kid who was like questioning life choices to going from being like one of our top performers in the organization. And so that's just, I think, when you align the skills with the right role, the mindset comes with it.
Yeah.
And when they're mismatched, it's going to deteriorate the mindset. Someone who's hard charging, you put me in a job where I have to sit and balance, check for errors in a report, my mood is going to be awful.
Yeah.
Throw a bunch of chaos at me and have me make a decision. I'll go home happy every day.
It's a very valuable lesson, and it goes so hand in hand with a term I'm trying to get out there that I'm calling personal prerequisites. And the idea being the same way where you go to school, you have to take a certain course before you can move on to the next one. We all have certain things that we need, either behaviorally or mentally or something, to set the stage for us to be successful in the next sort of endeavor that we're taking on. An example for me would be like, if I want to be successful to sit down and write a chapter of my book, I need to make sure that I like went for a walk or something and like decompress after whatever I just had with my kids. I need a cup of tea, I need some chocolate, and I'm like good to zone in, right? And I think we all have these sort of things that we need, like that the teammate of yours needed, that kind of analytical work in order to be successful in what we're doing. But most of us tend to overlook this. And I think it's really interesting that you're doing these color analysis spectrums, which I haven't looked into yet. I'll need to look into it after that. But I studied social and personality psychology, and it's just so interesting how it's so valuable, but so many people seem to dismiss personality as like pop psychology that doesn't matter, when really it's so fundamental to how we actually understand the world that we're living in.
Yeah.
And so, like, kudos to you for honoring that and acknowledging that because it's such a key part of leadership. And so what I want to unpack next is like in leadership, like what are the moments or like how are the ways that you're starting to really identify what are the strengths of your teammates? Because I think that's a really interesting piece.
I'm just kind of learning how to do that more on the fly. I was mentioning spectrum. That's a deliberate way of parsing it out. There's others too. I really like the predictive index. I'd look into that one. That's great for teams because it gives you a report and then pairs you up. And this is how you would work better with this dyad. They would do dyad assessments, right?
Yeah.
Tell you things to watch out for when you two are communicating. This one's going to do this and this one's going to do that. So be aware of it.
Nice.
Which is a great tool, I think, if you're trying to pair up partners or leaders of things. You can go, this is a balancing personality. So, but the more you study those things and pay attention to them, you can see certain behaviors that pop out. But what you don't see is their order. But I'm orange, green, yellow, blue. But when you do the exercise, right, they can be overlapping. And I feel like they are all really tight because I switch based on what's needed of me. I have that model in my head and I look at certain behaviors and go, a good friend of mine, she's also a behavior psychologist. She facilitates a lot of these. She's done a lot of like organizational development work.
Yeah.
And she's facilitated these discovery processes. We did one, but she said she has different ways she can ask a question, or she'll not overly inappropriately make fun of someone on purpose because that response tells her something about how they are, right? So she's testing social norms to see how they respond, and she's getting into moderation. So in negotiations, you really need to understand the personality of your counterpart so that you can properly negotiate with them. And so I want to get more into like, how can I work a room and walk away knowing, okay, this person's that. And so if I were to ever engage in them, it's such an important question to ask too. It's not just helpful as a leader, but I argue, I say this all the time, that every conversation you have in a business setting, like at work or whatever, is a negotiation of some sort.
Yeah.
The currency is different. You're asking for different things. A lot of time it's people's time or energy or their attention. Currency isn't always money. And when you can understand or you can profile fairly correctly, accurately your counterparts in any conversation, you know how to help them get around the emotional barrier to giving you the currency that you're asking for. So I really want to get better at that for sure.
Yeah. It's like a sneaky ninja skills of psychology.
Yeah.
Because yeah, you need it, but people don't really want to acknowledge it or talk about it. But I think it goes hand in hand with like executive presence and how you show up and the nuanced way that you understand not only how you're coming across, but how the way that you come across is either matching or mismatching with the way that the other person naturally functions.
Yeah.
And so I imagine being in the service for so many years and being in a transitionary phase, there's quite a few associations, at least for me, that come to mind with what someone who's like in the service and leadership, the traits that they would carry, we'll say that.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious from your perspective, like, how is that like for you? Like, how is it coming up and understanding your executive presence and then also mitigating that with any kind of associations you have outside of the military with what you may be like?
Yeah. I'd like to answer that with another question to you that'll help. Can you give me what your perception is of what it would be like to work with someone who's spent 20 years in the military?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind for me would be like authoritative, right? When I think I've never been in the military, right? So this is all associations based on what I've been taught in experiences, conversations, and mostly media consumption, right? And so when I think of the military, I think of rigid structure is what comes to mind. Very much like following the rules, following the order, not necessarily questioning someone in the ranks above you. I'm probably totally off base, right? I'll admit that.
This is good. This is good.
Yeah.
I think I know how people see me, but I'm not
Okay.
friend.
Right.
Confirming what I think.
Yeah. And so what comes to mind for me is when I hear I've been in the military for 20 years, when you say that to me, my assumption almost immediately is, well, you must value like rules and structure and like order. Therefore, in a position of leadership, I make the assumption that you would value that kind of approach to leadership. And so that you would expect that from the people who work under you.
Yeah.
Peace.
No, that's pretty much what I figure everyone thinks.
Hmm.
And I think for a good majority, I don't want to throw a number out there. I think probably for 80% of those that spend this amount of time in the military probably are that way.
Yeah.
It's interesting. People ask what it's like doing healthcare in the federal sector. It's, well, imagine a highly regulated industry inside of a highly regulated organization. And some of that is by nature of the environment.
Yeah.
There are just some rules and structure we have to follow. That's part of high reliability care. Pilots have checklists that and they don't fly until they've everything, because you don't want that to go down. And we try to, it's not that simple in healthcare, but we try to implement the same kind of philosophy.
Yeah.
And so the same is true on the true military operational side. So my previous years, we distilled these theories down into things we can just do and react, because you need speed.
Yeah.
You don't always have time to sit and think, and you have to be able to react. So some of that is necessary. Where I've departed from probably what most people, how most people think or view leadership, particularly in the military, is, and we're starting to see this too. This is becoming a cultural norm in the leadership style of military officers. It's not just me,
Okay.
but you can, dictation breeds compliance, not buy-in, not commitment. I can order my soldiers to do X, Y, and Z, and they'll go do it to a certain point. That doesn't create the type of buy-in or followership, as lack of a better word, that will bust through barriers, right? That will there are obstacles that will get things done no matter the cost. And so what I tell people is being in the military has been very helpful for me in a leadership role, the way that I want to lead, because you got to lead the person. You have to understand the person, right? You have to be that leader who removes barriers to success, not dictating orders, to make them willing to go put their life on the line.
Yeah.
You're having to lead a group of men and women to go out and put themselves in harm's way, and oftentimes repeatedly, and oftentimes in circumstances that you yourself aren't comfortable in, but you have to follow orders. That you got to get a team that comes with you to do that, and that is a different level of leadership than just dictating orders
Yeah.
and following a rigid set of rules. So that's that piece of it. I also really enjoy learning. That makes me feel really nerdy, but I enjoy understanding behavioral economics.
Mhm.
People have choices, and choices they make are done because of their intrinsic utility of that choice. And I want to understand why people make choices and do what they do, and help create an environment that allows them to choose what is good for both the organization and themselves. And so that's how I like to lead. So that'd be probably the big departure. And I think the other piece of it too, because people ask this, over the last 13 years, the majority of my staff have been civilians. We don't have that many active duty in the middle, lower parts of the org structure, particularly in a fixed facility, because they don't deploy, they don't go down, they're staying there. And that unit's not going to go. We rotate our military through as providers and nurses and such, because they need those skill sets in
Yeah.
combat. So they're there to get their sets and reps. And we do have to manage that to a certain extent down there as well. So that's why some of my role exists.
Yeah.
But it's about leading people to want to do their best, and they've all volunteered to do it. You don't need, and I think that's some of the old legacy way of those paradigms and what Hollywood portrays was what was necessary when there was a draft. People were being forced to come fight. So you got to shut off free thought real quickly and get them to assimilate and follow orders. Otherwise, you've got scattered cats across the battlefield. You wouldn't win any war that way. But now that we're a fully volunteer army, you are incentivized to join. I did. I joined in the wake of 9/11. So I was compelled to join, volunteered to do so, mostly because I wanted to help. Service was in my family, right? My grandparents were in World War II, and because so others don't have to. Like, if we don't volunteer, then the volunteer army goes away and we get drafted.
Yeah.
And I made a deal. Like, they paid for me. They paid for all my degrees, all my education. Okay, I'll stick this out. You pay your degree. And I'm walking away, hands clean, happy, pleased with that arrangement where they got 22 years of my life. I've gotten life experiences and education that would have never even been close to getting had I not done that. And so I think I felt as a leader, when I get soldiers, it's the same for them, right? They're there for a reason. So let's make it the best experience for them that it could be.
Valid. And I'm glad to hear you say that the approach to leadership is changing, because I'd like to say that I don't want to call out millennials too much, but I think the way that leadership is being viewed is changing. And I'd like to think that this whole old boys club is slowly starting to dissipate and go away. Slow but steady. And so I'm glad to see that you're seeing something a little bit similar. If we were to play on stereotypes, there are some positive stereotypes to order, the structure.
Sure.
Being a man who's seen as authoritative in leadership comes with benefits. And so I'd love to unpack your perspective on executive presence and leadership and how you go about it personally.
Yeah, it's funny you asked that because presence is one of the things of the five, I think, evaluation criteria I've been evaluated on my entire career,
Interesting.
particularly as enlisted. You're a non-commissioned officer. Now, they define it in different ways than I think we would in private industry. They put your physical fitness in that, right? So you project the presence of fitness because you're leading from the front. And we all have to be fit to do our job. This particular job has a high fitness requirement to it.
Yeah.
But we spend very early on learning how to present in front of groups and to teach and going through. The further you get up, this is true of any organization, right? The further you get up the organizational chart, the further away you are from the front lines. And the more weight your presence carries as a source of messaging than your spoken or written word, because you have limited interaction. They only see you passing by. They see you. You might get one shot to speak at them. That's all you get. And it's powerful. And I think this kind of is going to go into what we initially start throwing around. People have biases to certain behavior, and you need to be aware of it. And the Army's been aware of that, I think, for a while, that it develops a certain level of presence. You're at junior levels of also staff work. You're doing analysis and making recommendations to senior leaders who have to make a decision that could cost a multitude of lives. It's not just one. And you need to look like you know what you're talking about. So you could be the world's smartest analyst on a team. It's not going to work. But if you get up and you're fumbling through and you can't articulate, it's going to feel like you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And they're going to dismiss the message because of the messenger. I've seen it work to the opposite. I've seen people who are very charismatic and have a great deal of presence who have no idea what they're talking about and have led organizations down a pretty dark path.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a thing. And yeah, it's a fascinating topic.
It is. And I would actually agree that your physical presence should be part of your presence, aside from, okay, well, first of all, research shows that people very much consider your physical state as a reflection of who you are, your skill set, your competence, etc. It's like pretty privilege, right? If you look like you're physically fit, people assume you have the willpower, the discipline, etc., these positive traits to maintain your physical fitness. And I would agree with that. Like you need those traits. But then also, it's just such an interesting thing. And I'm trying to be mindful of my words, but it's very true. When I was doing research on stereotypes and biases, there were these experiments that we ran frequently where we would show people two different pictures and two different words. And they were tasked with just categorizing based on what their first impression, their first instinct was. And like biases come through in milliseconds, essentially. Like milliseconds. Like people see a word or a picture and immediately have an association with it. And typically it's in line with the associations that society would have you believe, right?
Law of averages, big numbers.
Yeah, but it's interesting how like consistently, right? It's like you run different experiments, different words, different pictures, different stereotypes, but the patterns are there. So when someone sees you, me, a different leader, that first impression in those split seconds based on what they like physically see matters. And so how physically fit you are how you carry yourself, your posture, your body language, even like the clothes you're wearing, all give off an impression like immediately. Right. And so I guess when you are perhaps in a hospital where you're all wearing the same uniforms or something like that's a little bit mitigated, but not quite, because underneath the uniform is still the individual that has the presence.
Right.
And so for me, it's always interesting to consider, like going back to the idea of commanding versus volunteering. And so for me in Canada, our healthcare system, pros and cons to the American healthcare system, but something that we struggle with as well is like hospitals that are oversaturated, like too many people, not enough staff. And it's a notorious problem where so many of the nurses, especially, are just burnt out. They're working like 12-hour shifts, et cetera. I'm sure you have the same issues. But I had to go to the hospital recently for my son who was sick. And it was just insane the lack of empathy and the lack of care that some of the nurses have because they're so desensitized and burnt out and overworked. And as someone who's in that position of leadership and understanding strengths and positions, who's also facing very real constraints, like how do you deal with something like that? Like how do you start to navigate these actual challenges that we're facing? And
Yeah, I can feel it too, the stress. I've observed very much the same type of behavior. For me personally, I just try to be very aware of the message I'm sending, right? Through my actions and my posture and presence. It's a little deeper for me. I'm trying to think of how to phrase it.
yeah,
So a lot of people think of executive presence in terms of shaping how someone views them.
yeah,
So there's very much an internal focus to it. I and I talk about this in my conscious communication model. So actions are the third domain of communication. So we
yeah,
speak, we write, and we act. We do things. And all three of those send a message.
yeah,
And so I'm concerned about how my actions communicate how they mean what they mean to me.
mm,
And I try to be very aware and recognize because I know when I get to a certain level of stress or point, like blue is my lowest color, and so it'll be very easy for me to get into orange. Just do my thing, and I'll neglect. I won't be rude. I'm very cautious of this. This is an interesting dynamic. My wife and I talk about this. You have some people who they get in a bad mood, and it's the entire world's fault, or at least that's how the world feels,
yep, yeah,
because it just takes. I'm very good at compartmentalizing my frustrations. I
okay,
will be ready to take some inanimate object not working right and throw it in an incinerator in 1 minute. And then my wife and my kids walk in and I'm like, oh, hi. And it's like I'm a different person
yeah,
because it's not, I'm very cognizant of not making them feel like they're adding stress or the source of, or even the punching bag.
yeah,
I'm just cognizant of that. And I think what I try to impart upon the team is when you're dealing with patients, understand where they're coming from. It doesn't mean where you're coming from is less important or not causing you stressors, but if you understand where the other person's coming from, it positions you much better to treat them in a way that's going to benefit them or not put them off, right? We deal with this a lot. I have in our portfolio, I've got patient relations, and part of that is there are two services, or member services, which is an education of the healthcare benefit, how to navigate claims and that sort of thing. The other is just general patient advocacy they come to when there's issues. Neither one of those people, by the time a patient goes to one of those two offices, they're already tipped off. They've had some sort of bad outcome or experience, or a claim hasn't been paid, and they're running. You are already receiving people on at a 9. You have to know that. You have to be aware of and disarm and not let them draw you off sides
mhm,
and not let your day spill over into theirs.
yeah,
Dr. David Schreiner, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with his work, he wrote a great book called Be the Best Part of Their Day.
mm,
It's about leading with empathy. And I think that's just a really good way of thinking of it, is every time you interact, make sure you're trying to focus on being the best part of their day. It's really hard to do. I don't want to say these things and make it sound like, oh, you just do this. It's easy when you're buried in a mountain of stress and tasks.
yeah,
But I think if you make that your focus, right? So if you're focused on, I'm going to be the best part of the person the day of the person I'm engaging with, and that's your focus, you don't have mental bandwidth to think about the pressure and the stress.
yeah,
You're taking it patient or customer time.
yeah, Yeah.
And then you
It's
just move on to the next and you do the same thing and keep that as your focus.
Yeah, it's true. I think often a lot of these things get categorized into empathy, emotional intelligence, things like that. I personally think that sort of the trifecta to aim for is empathy, emotional intelligence, and emotional maturity, because you need that empathy to even begin to understand like why the person's upset and play around with taking on their perspective. You need that emotional intelligence to understand the situation, how to navigate it. But then I feel like often people underestimate emotional maturity. And for me, that's really maturing in your own understanding of your own emotions. So being able to handle the emotions that you're having, good and bad. But then, like you said, understanding how to categorize them effectively so that they're not spilling over into every area of your life. And I think for me personally, like becoming a parent has forced me to develop my emotional maturity. My kids test my patience like no one else ever has. And so it's been, it's,
They know you best. Go ahead.
uh, my kids are 4 and 6, so they're still very young and very much in that phase of childhood. But it's true. Like I've had many days where it's not nearly as important as healthcare and like life or death, but having multiple meltdowns for multiple hours and then having to sit down and focus on something that's important to me for my work. It's difficult. It's challenging.
Yeah.
Like you have to learn to do that for yourself without relying on any sort of negative vices, I would say is the challenge for many people. Lots of conversations I've had where it's, well, I need a smoke break or I need a drink at the end of the day or I need this thing to regulate me. And the process of learning how to regulate yourself in real time, I think is very challenging for a lot of people. And so I'd love to hear from your perspective, especially in such high stakes situations. Like, how do you navigate something like that?
Well, I want to ask you another question because I was thinking as you talk. How do you define the difference between emotional intelligence and well self-awareness, right? And
Mm,
then emotional maturity
mm.
between being aware of and then being mature about it. Like, how do you define the difference?
I would define the difference as like the tangible reaction you have. So I can be extremely self aware, recognize I'm yelling at my kids, I'm losing my cool, I'm being not a nice person to someone across from me, and still continue to do it. Versus emotional maturity for me is like recognizing it's happening and understanding how to like put a stop to it or change it or do something about it tangibly, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Part of this is my personality. Like, the way I
Mm.
manage it is I never want to be. I don't want to be the guy walking around thinking everything's awesome and then everyone's laughing at my or criticizing behind their back because I have no clue that
Yeah.
I'm not self-aware, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
just hyper aware of that or concerned about it.
Mm.
So I think it all starts with heightened self-awareness, but then I think people also need to understand how self-awareness can benefit them, or I'm sorry, how emotional maturity can
Mm.
benefit them, like the damage their emotional immaturity is causing. I don't think people actually realize that, and they chalk it up to that's who I am.
Mm. Oh, that,
True, it is just who
yep.
you are, but it being who you are and doing something about it are not mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
I think having relationships that matter to you in your life where you've got people who feel psychologically safe to share how you're making them feel with you, to peel back that onion is helpful for getting people there.
Yeah.
But that's, and I'm going down that path because I can talk about how I do it or what I do,
Yeah.
but it's only because I care about it that I'm able to do those things.
Mm. Well,
Because not everyone, to your point, gets it. They
mm,
haven't seen the value in emotional intelligence, emotional maturity.
it's true. And I think the tricky thing starting with self awareness is that self awareness is always biased, either skewed all the way to the positive, where I'm great. What are you talking about? You're the person that's making this up. I'm fantastic. Or skewed all the way to the negative, where I am absolutely terrible and I suck at everything, when in reality, that's not the case. And so I think self awareness is really tricky. And I'm thinking back to my own sort of process of really getting into self awareness. You almost get stuck at the beginning where you're like, oh, okay, well, now I recognize here's all these flaws that I have and I have no clue what to do about them because change feels hard and I'm busy. And so
That's
it's,
the first step, though, right? Like at
it
least
is.
wanting to,
Yeah.
like different than figuring out how. And that's where I struggle. I can talk about how it's because I want to do. I feel like if you want something bad enough, you eventually figure it out. It doesn't have to happen today.
Yeah.
My journey on the whole emotional intelligence thing is as I started getting into behavioral economics and understanding. I think we've talked about this before, or at least interacted on Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow.
Mm. Yeah.
So you've got the number one brain that acts. That's just your instinct. You're just moving, no thought, right? You're reacting. The number two brain is your analytical brain, which is slow down, stop, and think about it. And that resonated with me going back to the military experience. And that, so how do you, because we want to be efficient, we need to be fast, quick thinkers, right? So I'm always trying to optimize myself. I guess that's the best way of looking at it. I want to be as effective and efficient an operator as I can be. So how do I make sure I can make fast, good decisions instead of fast, bad decisions? That book opened my eyes to the idea of reprogramming my biases, like being aware of them and reprogram towards effective decision making.
Okay.
Because the problem, biases by themselves, they're heuristic. They're a developed heuristic. They're not bad. But heuristics aren't bad things.
Yeah.
But unchecked heuristics become biased. That's bad because you don't know what's driving that decision, and it may not be the things that you want driving your decisions.
Yeah.
And so I just became super focused and obsessed on identifying my biases as they presented themselves. How do I know what my bias? How do I know that I'm making poor decisions that I don't realize I'm making? You don't know. And I asked someone, this was a session at Congress several years ago, and I asked, how do you know you're making a biased decision? Right? If I don't know I have this bias. And the best advice I got was it'll be tied to emotion. It'll probably be an emotional response.
Nice.
And so I just pay attention to if something triggers an instant emotion in me, I stop and go, okay, what is that about? What is that leading to? And it can be through the gambit, right? I'm really excited. I want to do this. Why?
Yeah.
Why is that the thing I want to do? Is that the right thing? Because this happens at work all the time. Let's say you have an objective that you want. Let's say we'll make it a negative thing.
Yeah.
Let's say you want a certain status, like a certain title or a certain award, and someone poses a project that if that project was successful, it would lead to that award. But the project doesn't make any sense for the rest of the organization, and it's probably going to cost the organization money. Like in that scenario, someone's going to pitch this, and that leader, if they're unchecked or not aware, they're, oh yeah, that's a great idea, and they don't really know what, but they're excited about it. It's not always anger; it can be other things.
Yeah, I think a good emotion to watch out for. Anything that's too, I'm not sure of the right word to use, but any emotion that's like a habit, like comforting in a way, because then you're so much less likely to question it because it's, I don't want to say automatic, but because everything becomes habitual, right? All of our heuristics and biases, everything starts to become subconscious, right? We're not aware of it. It's really hard to catch in the moment. And so I would just invite anyone listening to really reflect on anything that just feels normal, I guess is what I'm going for. Because normal is usually a sign of this is what I'm used to. This is the habit that I have. Therefore, I'm the least likely to question this. And so, yeah.
Yeah, that's been a big hallmark of my journey, and I write about this a lot. Uncomfortable is where we go to grow, but it'll keep you aware of not falling into that comfort zone.
Well, I think if I want to get really nuanced with this, there's a distinction to make between comfortable and like normalize.
Yeah.
And I think comfort is like a little more positive in a sense, at least from my interpretation, versus normal is just I'm so used to it, I don't even question it anymore. And so I guess I'll ask you one more question. Okay, because you're a leader who's modern, self-aware, understands presence and these things, like the fact that you're self-aware, how do you think that translates into the way that you actually lead as a leader? Because I find sometimes when we're so self-aware, we almost push other people into self-awareness, like with good intentions, but they're not always ready for that. And so when it comes to something like healthcare, like there's the business side to it, there's the people side to it, and there's like the practical, how they're actually handling the people who move through the hospital. But I don't know, how do you navigate like self-awareness and leadership and how that impacts the way you show up for others?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know that I've observed. I don't feel like maybe I am, and I don't realize it. that I try to impose other people to be self-aware, right? As I try to be.
Yeah.
I think it's a journey. And
Yeah.
it's a journey that you have to want
To welcome.
ever upon, right?
Yeah.
You got to want to do it. I've found that I feel like it makes me a better leader in a lot of ways. I think I've discovered, there's a lot of research to support this, but I've experienced better leadership outcomes by being vulnerable when in the right time and place, right? To just admit my mistakes and be aware. Like there are times when I've had a conversation that I was probably justified to say what I said. There was nothing objectively wrong with it. And I'll think back on it. Man, that could have been, by my measure, a little tone deaf. They had this and this going on. And I hadn't considered that before. And so I'll go back to that person and say, hey, as we talked, I realized I probably overlooked this. And just own it. And you'd be surprised the responses you get from people. And he's just not fumbling around, moving on from task to task.
Immediately, there's that emotional maturity. Most people are like, oh, ooh, this is uncomfortable, so I'm just going to avoid it.
Yeah, it can be uncomfortable, but again, it goes back to that's how we develop, that's how we grow. I had a conversation with Dr. Schreiner the other day about me reflecting on when I was in company command. It was probably my worst performance as a leader by my measure, my entire career. And I was just talking through some of the things that I identified on reflection. He's like, that's a great deal of self-awareness to do that. And I'm like, yeah, but that's how I get better.
Yeah.
And I think we all deal with insecurities. And to the most part, while there are some narcissists out there who are their biggest fan, but I think for the most part, we are our own biggest critic.
Yeah.
And it can do one of two things. It can cripple you, or you can use it to empower yourself. And I choose the latter, right? I use it to look back and it's a non-attributional assessment, but more so, okay, that didn't work. How do I do this better next time? And just constantly strive to be a better leader yesterday than I was today.
That's wonderful. It's what we all, in my opinion, what we should all strive for, right? Okay, back in grad school, one of the most interesting concepts I was exposed to is the idea of metacognition, which is where you think about your thinking, which is next level.
Exhausting.
It is exhausting, and it's very easy to spiral into overthinking. But when you do it well, the level of insight that you get is so incredible. And I like to approach it from the perspective of if I wasn't myself, if I was a third party coaching myself, if I was a leader having a conversation with myself, like how would I approach this and what advice would I give myself? And I think if you're able to experiment with that and get a hang of thinking about your thinking productively, like it's next level self-awareness that just gives you access to so much more rather than being in that comfort zone, being stuck doing things the same old way and not understanding why they're not working and just like misattributing it to a lack of skills or biases from other people.
Or your environment.
Yeah. Everyone's out to get you. Yeah. So, okay. Any final thoughts? Anything else you'd like to share?
No, I feel like I've done way too much talking already. I've enjoyed talking. I love the work you do, what you're putting out there, and deeply value and respect your opinion on these types of things. So I just enjoy chatting with you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And genuinely, thank you.